Hi, everybody, and welcome to Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. We are at the halfway point of the tour by now, having just visited the Schottenstein Center in Columbus for the very first time with Phish. It's now time to visit an old favorite, to go to the friendly confines of the North Charleston Coliseum in Charleston, South Carolina. This will be a 3-night weekend run. Charleston is a city brimming with both American history and Phish history. And we are lucky enough today to be joined by Charleston native Dave Scozarro, who tells us about both places to see, things to do, places to eat, and highlights from Phish's 35 years playing the Holy City. In a sense, you could see Phish's entire career arc by keeping track of the venues they've played in Charleston since they first visited in 1990. From small clubs to larger clubs, small theaters, and finally, the North Charleston Coliseum. They moved in 1995 and never left. They also played 2 shows at the local tennis stadium a couple of years ago, and Dave explains why it might not be such a great idea for the Phish crowd and the band to continue there. But we're not there yet. There's so much to love about both Charleston and the Coliseum. World-class food in the city, general admission seating in the venue, and almost 4 decades of music to dig into. So let's join Dave as he prepares us for July 11th, 12th, and 13th in Charleston. Dave, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm really excited to be the ambassador for Phish at North Charleston. I think it's awesome.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to have you here. For every episode, I'm trying to find someone who is very either geographically close or has a deep connection with the city that the band is playing. And you seem to fit the bill for Phish's 3 shows at the North Charleston Coliseum. This is after Columbus, so we're coming in from Columbus. These dates are July 11th, 12th, and 13th. So before we get too deep into the city or anything, Dave, what is your history in Charleston, and what's your relationship to the city like?
So I moved here in 93 after I graduated high school. I went to chef school at Johnson & Wales, which is a pretty prestigious chef school. And I visited the city, and I came down here, and the weather is phenomenal. There's tons of stuff to do here. And ever since then, I've lived in the same little area, which is called West Ashley. I've lived in West Ashley since 93. That's when my college buddies that I met when I visited here, one of them was a huge Deadhead, and he had these random tapes hanging on his wall. And this is stuff that I'm not used to. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You got all these random like tapes that are different colors, and at the end was Phish. Okay, I have no idea what a Phish is. So one summer, it must have been between 94 going into 95, because I would go home for the summer. Well, I would listen to these Phish tapes. And the first tape that I ever listened to was 4/18/92, Set 2.
Oh, classic. California, right?
Right? When it was soundboard, and they kept saying Squirt Gun Break and stuff all the time. And they had this Harry Hood with this Linus and Lucy jam and stuff. And I was kind of like, but what caught me, and I kept listening to this over and over again, was Lizards. And I'm like, damn, this Lizards jam is pretty tight. The ending when he does the solo and stuff, I'm like, this is pretty tight. I wanted to listen to more. We came back in 95, and a couple months later, they played at the Coliseum. So that was my first Phish show. They opened up with Dinner and a Movie, and I haven't seen it since. So I'm going on 50 50 plus shows, and I haven't seen my opener of my first show yet, which is pretty crazy. 95 at the Coliseum was a lot different. They had everything in there was reserved. They had seats on the floor. I had a reserved seat on the floor, and the guy next to me was writing stuff in this notepad. And I'm like, what is this? What are you doing? So I waited till set break. I don't want to bother the guy, He's showing me his notepad. He's like, oh, well, so the previous show, Jimmy Buffett came out and
Right
played
in West Palm Beach.
Right. And so I'm sitting there and the guy's showing me his set list pad. And he's like, oh, and the show before that in Orlando, they had this crazy stash and they're like Dogface Boy. And I have no idea what this guy's talking about because I don't know all the songs like that. I thought it was curious. It was interesting to me. Later on, you start to pick up stuff like the Farmer's Almanacs and these types of things I started catching on. There was a store in Rochester called Aaron's Alley. And so when I was home for the summer, we would go in there and you could have them make tapes for you. They sold the Farmer's Almanacs. It was a big Phish, Grateful Dead type store. Very, very, very famous in Rochester. So that's kind of where, I kind of got my start in Charleston. All my roommates went to the show.
So what is it about Charleston? You said you've lived there for many, many years. What is it, forgetting about Phish for a second, what would you say if you were the ambassador of the city to the larger Phish community? What is it about Charleston? What can you find there, for example, that you can't find anywhere else? What makes that city special in South Carolina?
So Charleston is the history. Some people may not be into that, but there's like Civil War history that you can't recreate. You can't go to Deer Creek and say, hey, the first shot of the Civil War was shot here.
Right.
Okay. I mean, you can't go to Civil War plantations like Boone Hall and stuff like that and recreate that. This stuff exists here. Charlestown Landing, one of the first Spanish settlements, is here. You can go downtown on the Battery, and there's cannons there that shot at Fort Sumter. Now you can visit Fort Sumter. You can visit Fort Moultrie. There's also the World War II aircraft carriers here called the Yorktown, which fought in Midway. Maybe not to some people. Okay, I mean, I can't sit here and say every single person is going to go downtown and check it out, but you can't recreate that anywhere else. This is the history of Charleston. The other thing is the beaches, okay? You can literally, and I know people that rent a beach house for Phish weekend. It's 3 nights. It's going to be hot in July, but you could do that. It's 20, 30 minutes, to the Coliseum and back. But you can't get that at Alpharetta. You can't do that. You're stuck like in a suburban neighborhood there. There's just not a lot of places where you can do a lot of different stuff like that. And the restaurants in Charleston are some of the best in the word.
Yeah, the food is outstanding.
I mean, the food is crazy here. You can go downtown. The best, some of the best chefs in the world cook here. Some of the best restaurants in the world are here. So if you're a foodie, if you're a beer nerd, okay, you're welcome. The weather is incredible here in July. It's going to be hot. Although an indoor stadium, I was hoping and praying that they weren't going to play at the tennis center again. Because I worked on Daniel Island for a long time, and I know a lot of those shows are either canceled or delayed because we have thunderstorms almost every day in the summer. When Phish played here at the tennis center in 2023,
2022, I think it was. Okay. I think so.
So the second night there was a huge thunderstorm as we were coming into the venue, and they basically said, "Stay in your cars, don't come yet." Okay, so yes, the tennis center is an awesome venue. Not for Phish. All right. Number one, they don't want you to tailgate. They don't want you to have a shakedown. There's 2 hotels on the whole island of Daniel Island. There's nowhere to park. Yes, is it a killer venue? Yes. The floor is clay. It's nice to step on and whatnot. But in the middle of July, I'd much rather have it at the Coliseum. Just being honest.
For sure. And I think a lot of people feel that way. That's come up a lot in my conversations with people about indoor versus outdoor on summer tour.
The light rig, I think, plays a lot into it. All right. Because Daniel Island, they had these weird little LED things that were like stationary. In North Charleston Coliseum, that thing moves like crazy. And I'm not sure if they want to bring two light rigs anymore. I mean, I don't know if that's an argument or not. But to me, if I'm seeing Phish, I want to see Kuroda at his full game. I don't want to see him hampered. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, of course.
So, I mean, the Coliseum brings that.
Well, let's take a look into the Coliseum. So again, these shows are July 11th, 12th, and 13th. As you said, 3 nights. We are back to the friendly confines, I call it, of the North Charleston Coliseum. It's one of the few venues on this tour that has a very long Phish history. A lot of the shows or venues on this tour don't have a deep Phish history. As far as I can tell, the North Charleston Coliseum hasn't changed very much in the 30 years that Phish has been playing there, although it's technically the North Charleston Coliseum and it's located in the municipality of North Charleston. For the purposes of this conversation, it'll just be Charleston, inclusive of the city. The North Charleston Coliseum, as I mentioned, was opened in 1993. Phish has been playing there since 1995. It's become a regular stop almost always. And you mentioned this, that it's weird that they're playing there in the summer because they usually play it on fall tours.
Mm-hmm.
But it's become a fan favorite venue because, like you said, it's a beautiful city. And the fact that it's general admission, either general floor or GA seats. Its capacity is 13,000, and although it's much newer than some other indoor arenas that Phish normally plays, like, say, Hampton Coliseum or Nassau, which are, kind of minor league hockey arenas, although the Nassau Coliseum doesn't host any hockey anymore. The North Charleston hosts the South Carolina Stingrays and the Charleston Southern Buccaneers, who are the NCAA team for the Charleston Southern University. So to me, it reminds me of those other arenas that are typically built in the 70s, even though this one was built in the 90s. Would you agree with that? Or do you see something different about the North Charleston Coliseum, say, compared to Hampton?
Man, people are going to get really mad at me, but Charleston is Hampton on steroids. I mean, I've been to Hampton. People can argue with me, but Hampton's getting old.
Yeah,
okay?
It is.
All right. Now, North Charleston has gone through a lot of renovations where Hampton has stayed the same. North Charleston expanded all their concession areas. North Charleston Coliseum, they just added this massive parking garage, all right, which is awesome. Because when they played there in 2019, the Lion King was there at the Performing Arts Center. The Performing Arts Center, they share parking, and they have massive shows there. I mean, they had Hamilton, Les Mis. I saw Greg Allman there. Okay, I mean, I saw Primus there. It was incredible. So hopefully they don't kind of have a show at the Pack this time because it takes up some of the parking. But they just opened this brand new parking garage. It's beautiful. It's right next. And they keep opening hotels. They just opened the Top Golf. I can go back a little bit more in the history because we had season tickets for the hockey team in 2019. When Phish played there the last time, we had season tickets. So we were going to the Coliseum probably a few times a week.
Right, and this is December 2019.
Yeah. And so I've been to the Coliseum a million times. Is it perfect? No. But if you're talking compared to Nassau, which I've never been to Nassau, all right, but I do have friends that lived on Long Island and stuff like that. I've been to Hampton a bunch of times. There's a reason that Phish hasn't played there since, 2018. Phish has had plenty of opportunities, I'm sure, to play at Hampton, but they haven't. So I don't know what the reason is, but Charleston, the area around the Coliseum so the airport is 5 minutes down the road. The interstate is right next to the Coliseum, which is stuff that I'm sure that they kind of take into account. There's so many hotel rooms there that you can walk to. I mean, I could name 10 right off the bat that you can literally walk to the lot. There's so much stuff to do. If you wanted to, you could park your car on Friday at your hotel and not move your car for 3 days. You could walk to the Coliseum. You could walk to, there's a million restaurants right there. They're all chain restaurants. I get it. They're not the restaurants that are downtown like Husk or Hall's Chop House or Chubby Fish or something like that. I get it. But if that's what you wanted to do, you could do that. And that's what you used to do at Hampton. That was the cool thing about Hampton, was you could stay at your hotel, walk to the Coliseum, maybe walk across the street to Chili's, okay, or something like that. Maybe some people would go to Hooters. Okay, I didn't.
We're all familiar with that Hooters. Yeah.
Yeah, I
If you
mean
know
everyone
one in the country, it's the one next to Hampton if you're a Phish fan.
everyone knows the Hooters, but like what else is there? I mean, like I love the mothership, man. Trust me. Okay. The best show I ever saw was Hampton 97 second night, right? I'll put that up against anybody. So there's no I will never bash Hampton, but it's old. It hasn't been renovated, I mean to my knowledge, and maybe they just want something new. I mean, I don't know. To me, Charleston for them, they stay downtown. I mean, you're talking about world-class hotels, world-class restaurants.
Well, how far is the Coliseum from the downtown area? Because when you think of Charleston, or at least when I do, and I've been to the Coliseum in Charleston, I always think of Charleston as like this charming, beautiful antebellum city, one of the few antebellum cities not wrecked by the
Yeah.
Civil War. You
Mhm.
know, it's got, so you mentioned the history. You know, we don't have to repeat it because you kind of nailed it. But how far is it if you did get a hotel downtown? What are you looking at back and forth getting to the shows?
Well, the thing is, you jump on the interstate, so you jump on 26, which is right next to the Coliseum, and you're talking 10, 15 minutes. I mean, there's not going to be rush hour on Saturday or Sunday, unless you got caught up in something on Friday, maybe. But you literally take 26, 10, 15 minutes and get off at East Bay Street or King Street or somewhere like that. There's a really cool area called Park Circle, which is right by the Coliseum. And there's tons of restaurants. It's a new little area that's popping up with killer restaurants, killer breweries, and stuff like that. There's really cool areas. Like if you just kind of go out of the way a little bit, there's a place in Park Circle called Jackrabbit Philly, and it's like gets killer reviews. If you just kind of go out of the beaten path a teeny little bit, you can find some really cool stuff. And downtown, yeah, downtown's an awesome city. You can do tours, you can do ghost tours, you can do walking tours. There's so much history if that's what you wanted to do. And then you end the tour and you're standing at Magnolia's or slightly north of Broad or like one of these restaurants that you see on the Food Network or Southern Living or something like that. It's all right there. Charleston is not a very huge city.
No, it's very walkable too.
Yeah, oh, you can walk everywhere. You can walk up and down the Battery, up and down East Bay. And then the market, okay, the market is really cool. The market they have it's all local vendors that sell stuff up and down. It's like on two sides and you walk up it. And there's restaurants on either side of the road. Most of the travel packages they offer for these shows were near the Coliseum, but they had one at the Mills House, which was available. And that's where I came and visited here. We stayed at the Mills House.
When you
Uh,
were first getting familiar with Charleston, right?
when I,
Going to school.
so the first time that I came here, we stayed there. So there's a lot of really nice places. I went when I went to college, it was downtown, so I'm pretty familiar with that. But I mean, the Coliseum is cool. To me, it's 12,000, 13,000 seems a little bit high to me. 12, okay, so, Phish has the second highest attendance of a single show. They lost out to Billy Joel.
Speaking
Um,
as a Long Islander, I'm
yeah,
proud of both.
yeah. So the show's in 2010, which, I guess we'll get to that point in a little bit. The shows in 2010, which were incredible. The second night, that's the second highest attendance, which I think that Phish gets invited back because they sell the place out. People, they want to sell tickets, and I know that there's people at the Coliseum that like Phish specifically. I've heard that. I've known people through the years. You meet people who work there. You know people. You hear rumors and stuff, and I know that there's people at the Coliseum that love Phish. And there's that's one of the reasons why they keep coming back. But there was also a big gap. People get confused by that. You're like, yeah, they started there in 95 and they played there in 96, but there was a 15-year gap between 96 and 2010, 14-year gap, something like that. So in 96, I saw a bunch of shows that fall tour. We saw the Halloween show. So they played there in 95 and 96. And then for some unknown reason, I don't know why, there was a 14-year gap. And then they came back in 2010, and it was a huge deal. The general manager of the hockey team came out and had a press release that said that they had to cancel their opening weekend because there was a rock band that was scheduled to play. So I knew somebody who worked at the Coliseum, and I asked her, she called her boss, and I said, "Hey, is this Phish?" And her boss's response was, "I can't tell you yes or no, but if I was booking hotels, I would book hotels." So I
Good
immediately,
answer.
okay, so I immediately, okay, I'm texting everybody. Back then, I don't even know what we did back then. We didn't have Facebook and stuff like that, but I'm immediately telling all my buddies, I'm like, "Hey man, Phish is coming back." And this time it's 2 nights. That was the first 2 night run was in 2010. But in 96, we did Charlotte and then Charleston and then Atlanta and Gainesville. Well, when we were in Charleston, we were walking through the lot and stuff, and they had the doors wide open. And they were playing Once in a Lifetime. And we're like, "Damn, this is kind of weird." And so we stood there for a while, and you could hear every single note that they were playing. It was wild. You figure it's a sound check. They don't want people. But they played Once in a Lifetime like 2 or 3 times in a row. And we were going to the Halloween show. And so we're like, I guess they're playing the Talking Heads.
But let's stick to Charleston for a little bit, their history, because yeah, they took that long break. But if
Yeah.
you go back to the first few times, they've been playing the city for 35 years, and
Yeah.
their first appearance, of which there's no available recording, audience or official, was on January 31st, 1990, at a bar that you and I spoke about off mic before we started recording, called Miskins, Myskyn apostrophe S, and they were opening for Widespread Panic,
Yeah.
as was their style at the time, right? When they would play below the Mason-Dixon, they would open for Panic, and when it was above the Mason-Dixon, Panic would open for them. But what's interesting about this gig is they played on January 31st, 1990, opening for Panic, but they came back literally a few days later on February 5th for a solo show for just them,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty amazing. And there is a
Yeah.
recording of that show.
Yeah, Miskins was this weird little club that I never really, it's like you would go there. I saw 90s bands there. I mean, Hootie and the Blowfish would play there before their big album came out, Crack Rear View or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Savannah a couple weeks ago for Trey, and he talked about Widespread a lot. And he specifically talked about Mikey Hauser, which I thought was interesting because, like, we're talking about this, how they open for each other a lot. He took his time out of his own acoustic show to talk a lot about Widespread and specifically Mikey Hauser and how they kind of like opened up their doors for them. They kind of took them in. Hey, this is the South, that they're from Athens, but still they would play in Charleston. I don't know how many times a year. I mean, probably 4 or 5 times a year back then. And they kind of took them under their wing, which is really cool. There's also a place down here called the Music Farm, which is very famous.
And it's still in operation.
Yeah, well, they've had a lot of different owners.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing show, and of course, COVID put a hurting on them. But I've seen so many shows at the Music Farm. I mean, tons and tons of bands. I mean, I saw Humphreys there like 25 years ago, like just bands like that. that I could see Phish getting their start there. And I know that there's some shows out there, but they're kind of, that they don't sound that great. They've played here and they played at the Galliard. So,
Yep, in 1994. It seemed when I was doing my research about Phish in Charleston, right? Forget about any specific venue, where they started at Miskin's, which is this tiny little club.
yeah,
Then they jumped up to the Music Farm, and then they went up to the Galliard Auditorium in 94, which is a beautiful theater. Then they made the jump to the Coliseum in 95, and they've kind of stayed there unless they play at the tennis stadium that you mentioned a little bit earlier.
Well, the tennis stadium is the same size as the Coliseum. Okay. Now, the tennis stadium used to be 7,000 and they added 4,000 seats onto it. So then they started getting Dave Matthews and Phish and, a lot of country. Most of the bands that play at the tennis stadium are country. They would get a couple bands here and there. But the thing that's crazy to me is they went from the Galliard in 94, which is 1,800 seats, to the Coliseum in 95, which is like 12,000, or, some say 13,000. That to me is a crazy jump. And I don't remember it being empty. I mean, there was a lot of people there. I mean, I wonder, is that the time when a live one would have came out?
A live one came out in 95. So and that was kind of their modus operandi then, because even here in New York, right? Not the opposite end of the country, but certainly far away enough from Charleston, where they would play in 94. They opened the year at the Beacon Theater, which I think has a capacity of something like 1,800 or 2,200. And then they closed the year on December 30th at Madison Square Garden.
Wow. Yeah, that is.
And they didn't sell out Madison Square Garden. I don't want to give a false impression, but just making that jump and getting the opportunity is insane.
Well, that actually makes sense, though, because I figured, hey, that's kind of a weird jump. But to me, like, a live one would have came out. I didn't know, obviously, back then, a lot of stuff that they played. I mean, the You and Drum I saw from that show is one of the best that they've ever played with the Brick House Jam. Okay, that was at my first show. But I didn't know Big Black Furry Creature from Mars. I didn't know Acoustic Army. Later on when I started getting more into Phish, like I said, I was talking to the guy with the setlist pad who was sitting next to me. But in 96, I knew more stuff. I remember I finally called seconds. We were hanging around the second set and we were talking about it. I was like, oh, I think they're going to open with Chalk Dust, like, oh. And they opened with Chalk Dust. And I was like, yes. I called the song or whatever, but 96 was cool because they play Life on Mars a lot. Page had the theremin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm doing that right. Page had the theremin at that show in 96, which was cool. I mean, I don't know how many times people have seen them play the theremin.
play Somewhere Over the Rainbow every now and
Yeah,
again.
and it wasn't Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It was something totally different. They played like this Inagata Vita jam, in like Split Open and Melt or something like that. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, it's a cool, but back then, the cops were so bad back then. And like the thing that a lot of people will talk about, they don't want to go back to Charleston because they got arrested in 95 or something like that. Okay, I get it. I mean, they were like filming the lot like it was some kind of I don't know, military operation or something like that. It's like, dude, we're just going to a concert. Like, calm down.
Yeah, and
I'm
also the crowd's gotten older, though. We've gotten much less
yeah.
rowdy. Speaking as a resident of Queens, everyone is making a big deal about the Forest Hills Stadium.
Yes.
And to me, it's like Phish, most of us are in our 40s and 50s now. It's
Yeah.
not the same.
No. I mean, people complain, but like I was there in 2019 and there was a huge shakedown. I didn't see one cop the whole time.
And it's a great shakedown, and because the weather's beautiful.
The shakedown was incredible. I mean, I can't wait to see what they're going to do in the summer.
Right.
Because they're going to open the lots at like 2 or 3 o'clock. It's going to be hot, but it's going to be massive. And the cops aren't going to say, like, so I don't know if the gap was they wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be like that. Because I remember at 96 in the parking lot, right next to our car was this little like shack looking thing. Well, they were pulling people's cars in there and searching their cars and stuff, like putting people in handcuffs and stuff. And I'm like, what is going on? 95 and 96, I can understand if it left a bad taste in some people's mouth, and the thing is, I kind of felt bad, being from here. I mean, at the time I was only living here for a couple of years, but I felt bad that it was like that. I mean, they literally had night vision. I remember a guy, a couple cars over from us. Now, you shouldn't be peeing in the bushes. I get it. But the guy's peeing in the bushes, and there's a cop with night vision, like yelling at this guy to stop peeing in the bushes and stuff like that. And it's like, why are we doing that? Like it's a concert. It's a rock concert. If Aerosmith was playing there or Billy Joel or somebody, they wouldn't be out there with night vision. Like I thought it was totally out of control. And I can understand if some people, like when they came back in 2010, if they're like, I'm not going there because it's a prison compound. But they changed. By then they had different police chiefs or whatever it was. They just decided that they were going to kind of loosen up a little bit. And in 2010, it was a lot different.
And it's been different. Like they've made up for it. Just looking at some of the numbers, Phish has played, at least to date, at the time of this recording, they've played Charleston 11 times in the 3.0 era, 9 of which have been at the Coliseum. The exceptions were you brought up what is known as the Credit One Tennis Stadium.
Yeah.
And the band seems to enjoy playing 2-night runs or 3-night runs at the Coliseum in 3.0. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think inspired that? And this is pure speculation. No one really knows the answer except, as Trey might say, the suits who do the booking. Yeah. What do you think inspired whoever was inspired to book 3 nights in summer in Charleston in the Southeast?
Because of the weather. I read a report, and I don't remember where it came from, but the Wilmington show scared a lot of people. The Wilmington show, people could have got seriously hurt or killed at that show because of the lightning, the rain. The stage is basically a temporary stage just put up in the middle of nowhere. Okay. And it could have came down in the wind. I mean, who knows? I remember reading this article. It was recently. I can't remember who put it out, but they specifically were talking about the Wilmington show and insurance. And when you're dealing with storms with people and metal bleachers or wind and rain and lightning and stuff like that, that I think some of that it has to do with insurance. Where if you're playing inside, it doesn't matter if there's a huge thunderstorm. If they're playing at the tennis center this summer, I would be worried as hell
Sure.
that there's going to be a thunderstorm and the show's going to get canceled or something like that. But the thing is, they're also playing Chicago indoors. They're also playing Columbus, Ohio, Pittsburgh, all these different places. It's not just Charleston. This is across the board. They're making almost like a complete change that they're not playing as many outdoor places.
Right. And it allows them to set up for multi-night runs without worrying about, you have to cancel a set or you have to cancel a night or you have to push now one night is one long set instead of two sets because one got canceled the night before,
Remember Northerly Island? I was telling my wife this. They played at Northerly Island, I'm pretty sure. And then they stopped and then they started back up the next day with the same song. I think it was Caspian or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was 2014.
Right? But the thing is that in the middle of the summer, that stuff happens and you can't control it. You can't control when a thunderstorm comes rolling across. Because the thing is, too, the tennis center has never had anybody played there more than 2 nights. Dave Matthews has played there 2 nights. They've never had anybody play for 3. To me, three is awesome because you get to see so many different songs. In 2019, when they played 3 nights, is so much stuff. And I know they had the no repeat thing. They kind of ran out of stuff towards the end or whatever. You get to see a lot of stuff. You don't have to travel far. I live 5 minutes from the Coliseum. I'm lucky. I don't need a hotel. I don't need, as much other stuff that other people would need. So for me, going to like some economical shows, the tickets weren't that expensive or nothing. But I know that some of these hotels and stuff, people, as soon as they find out there's a special event, they jack the prices up, which is unfortunate, but it happens. Same thing happened in Hampton and all these places. That's why, like, when we try to catch the rumors early and book hotels early. But yeah, it's awesome to get a 3-night run. Well, Charlotte was always a one-nighter. Raleigh was always a one-nighter. So maybe they're trying to get away from some of these one-nighters too.
I think that's the case. I think there's only 2 stops on this whole summer tour. I think it's Columbus and Pittsburgh, where they're only playing one night, everything. And that's been the trend.
Yeah.
That's been the trend the last couple of years. To end this on a positive note, and Dave, I can't thank you enough for coming on and giving us the locals guide to Charleston and being game for talking about Phish's history in the beautiful city. I know you're very much into fine dining and stuff like that. What are some of the best restaurants? And it doesn't have to be the nicest restaurants per se, but what would you throw out there as recommendations for listeners who may be visiting Charleston for the first time?
It kind of depends on what you're looking for. For me, if you're looking for beer, go to the Charlestown Fermentory. There's a couple of them. There's one downtown. There's one in West Ashley right by me. It's not far from the Coliseum. Food, if you're going downtown, there's so many places downtown.
Name a couple.
Magnolia's, Chubby Fish, Vern's, 167 Raw. A lot of those. Okay, you're staying close to the Coliseum. I want to go someplace and get some killer stuff. You go to Park Circle, which is 5 minutes down the road. There's a place called Jackrabbit Philly. There's a place called Tattooed Moose, which has been on the Food Network a million times. They have killer burgers. They have a duck club. There's a place called Evo, which is extra virgin oven. They have killer pizza. There's a brewery called Holy City, which is extremely Phish friendly. They have a beer year-round called Olfactory Hues that's on the menu. Now, when Goose played in December, they made a beer for the shows that they sold at the Coliseum. So I would not be surprised at all, because they're very Phish friendly, that they're going to have a special beer for sale. But you can visit their brewery. Their brewery is very close to the Coliseum. If you go up through Park Circle, they have a massive tap room. They have a huge Phish flag right in their tap room. They have tons of beers. They have a little oyster bar now. They have a huge outdoor area. Across from there is the Firefly Distillery, and they make the sweet tea vodka, which, if it sounds weird, try it. I guarantee that. Try it, okay? Because they make special cocktails and stuff there. They have concerts there. Karingbin is playing tonight at the Firefly Distillery. All this is a very short distance to the Coliseum. You could find all this stuff. It's not hard.
All right, well, Dave, I can't thank you enough for taking the time on relatively short notice to come on and be the ambassador for Charleston. To any listeners who might be coming in for these 3 nights, again, July 11th, 12th, and 13th at the North Charleston Coliseum. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you. Dave, thank you so much.
If you see me out there, give me a shout. If you got time today, listen to 10/16/10. Okay, one of the best shows I ever attended. It was at the Coliseum. There's YouTubes of it. The Fluffhead Peak. I mean, the whole show is incredible. If you have a few minutes today, listen to that or on your way to the Coliseum.
And that's it for today's episode about Phish's upcoming 3 shows at the North Charleston Coliseum in mid-July with Dave. I'd like to thank Dave for joining me today, Phish.in for all of the recordings used in today's episode, Phish.net for all of the deep dive background information we had to provide, and I'd like to thank the Mockingbird Foundation, as always, for everything they do for children's music education in schools. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You can visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can to keep this project going. You could also follow Attendance Bias anywhere on social media. Thank you so much again for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.